One of Ubisoft's many flagship titles, Far Cry 6, was recently announced at Ubisoft Foward. The announcement of the game was met with praise from fans and critics alike, with many excited for the new antagonist of Far Cry 6, President Anton Castillo, who is of course being played by Giancarlo Esposito, who is obviously most well known for portraying Gus Fring in Breaking Bad. Ubisoft seem to be, of course, making the villain the clear focus and poster boy for the new title, as is almost tradition with the Far Cry games now. As well as this game, it seems to be going back to its roots and having a focus on a Caribbean island setting rather than rural America or the Himalayas. It's also most likely going to be a prequel considering how Far Cry 5 ended and the release of Far Cry New Dawn early last year. Now, this new game is set to take place on the fictional Caribbean island called Yara, which seems to be heavily inspired by Cuba. This setting seems to be much more reminiscent of the earlier Far Cry games, especially Far Cry 3, which was met with a large amount of praise on its release. Now, whilst this new setting is something more like past games, we are for the first time actually going to be getting a city-urban setting within this map, which means we're going to see an urban environment for the first time in the Far Cry series. This addition of an urban environment is very welcome, to be honest, on top of the tropical island setting, and hopefully we might get to see a change in traversal with things like the grappling hook, wingsuit, and air travel, and how that'll all work in this game with a massive urban place within the map. This change in setting most likely suggests that we're going to see something a little bit more similar to Far Cry 3, at least in terms of setting and location. This series has taken a bit of a downturn recently, with New Dawn being a copy and paste of Far Cry 5 and itself was relatively shallow and had a lot of repetitive cookie cutter gameplay, albeit fun cookie cutter gameplay though. However, with the new team over at Ubisoft Toronto being head development rather than Ubisoft Montreal, it's somewhat promising we may see a bit of a change up in the formula compared to recent games in the series. The game's antagonist Anton Castillo as well will actually have a slight change up in his story as well compared to previous antagonists in the series. His son Diego will actually be somewhat the game's antagonist as well, and from what we saw in the CGI trailer, we'll see his struggle with good and evil as suggested with the grenade, and the ambiguous ending that we were left on and whether or not he dropped that grenade into a group of people. This leads me to believe that the son Diego may possibly play a bigger role in the game than expected and be just as important as Anton is in the story, and we may get to see how Diego's character may or may not develop into the same person that his father is, and we see how the player may have an effect on his character changes and who he becomes by the end of the game. This could all be decided by a simple choice, or maybe things we do throughout the game. This will be really interesting to see because, as we know, Far Cry is no stranger to choices at the end of the game, whether or not we kill antagonists or let them live, or what ending we choose at the end of the game. So whether or not this comes down to a simple choice at the end of the game or things we do throughout will be really interesting to see. And it would be very, very cool to explore as well. It's something we've never seen in previous entries in the series, and we may get to see how these famous Far Cry villains become so evil and corrupt through Diego in Far Cry 6. Now, a theory that's been floating around the internet with Diego is that he is actually Vaz from Far Cry 3, and this is due to a similar eyebrow scar the two share, and this is meant to serve as some kind of origin story for Vaz, creating an overarching narrative for the series. Now, as you could probably tell from my tone, I don't think this is true. I think this theory is really fucking reaching it, and I'm pretty sure Diego is a completely new character. But if it is true, it'll be very, very cool to see an origin story for Vaz if this is the case. But I just don't think it is, because I feel like they probably just want to create a completely new character and show his kind of character development into someone like his father, or into someone who isn't a complete cunt and a bitch of a dictator. And now that we're on past the antagonists, let's talk about the main character. And of course, for some reason, Ubisoft have been like, let's just create a silent protagonist and we'll use them instead, and we will just make the character choose a gender and customize them and all that, and they won't talk. And silent protagonists at this point in gaming, I think, shouldn't even exist anymore, unless it's a very certain type of game. But if you're creating a single player action adventure game in a sandbox open world, give us a good character. And thankfully this time around, they're at least giving us a character with a name. And their name is Dani Rojas, who's playable as either female or male. I would prefer if Ubisoft just gave us a set protagonist who is either female or male, but with recent allegations, we know why they're not doing that. But look, in all honesty, I couldn't really care whether or not the protagonist is male or female. It really shouldn't matter that much what the gender of the main character is, but it does kind of hinder the game's story and stuff if they wanted to make a silent protagonist, which thankfully they're not doing, and this protagonist is motivated and will have dialogue. So that's quite nice to hear. The few things that we do know about the main character is that they are a resistance fighter who will help fuel the revolution in Yara and of course engage in guerrilla warfare as in every other Far Cry game. And yeah, it's going to have a lot of first person shooter gameplay. That's really about it. There's not much to say about this main character. As far as we know, they're just probably going to be the same as any other characters in the series and serve as the person who drives the force of the regime that's going against the very, very evil antagonist of the game. So either way, I'm sure we're probably going to get a decent protagonist for this game, and I'm pretty sure we're going to get a great antagonist given the actor, so even if they're not the most developed character, the antagonist is of course going to be greatly acted. But look, given the few details we have about both protagonist and antagonist, there's not much to go on, because they're keeping a lot of this Far Cry stuff and the story stuff kind of hidden away probably for the gameplay reveal. In terms of gameplay, it's hard to tell how this game will function compared to previous entries. It's most likely going to be somewhat similar to the last few anyway. The few screenshots we've been shown have an airplane mid-flight, which most likely suggests air travel will be in the game. As well, we saw a tank in this screenshot, which means we may actually get to drive a tank for the first time in the series, and we will actually have to go up against tanks as well, so that'll be awesome. It's been said that there's a large variety of weapons and vehicles at our disposal, along with Fangs for Hire, which is returning from Far Cry 5 of course. And Ubisoft seems to be liking to do these weird animal companion things because it's going to be in Assassin's Creed Valhalla as well. And one of these animal companions we saw was the little two-legged sausage dog Chorizo, which is actually going to be used to distract enemies with its cuteness rather than just attacking them. Now, this large variety thing sounds very nice to hear because Far Cry 5 and New Dawn's gameplay was a little bit more shallow, especially when compared to previous entries. And I'm happy to see that Ubisoft is promoting just a little bit more variety in this game, and hopefully they will deliver with this promise with the new entry in the series. And I'm very excited to see how all of this will work in an urban environment, and I'm very excited to see that we are just returning to a Caribbean island kind of setting as well. This game is set to be released early next year on February 18th, 2021, and will be cross-gen for PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X. I'd imagine with Gamescom coming up soon, we'll most likely see our first glimpse of gameplay there, or maybe during the end of Summer of Gaming or at another self-titled Ubisoft event. I'm not really quite sure when we're going to see gameplay though. Personally, I'm actually quite excited for this title, as it seems to be combining new and old elements into this title and providing a variety in its gameplay, which is something I think Far Cry has always kind of struggled with, because it's a first-person shooter, you can only have so much variety in gameplay and exploration. So I'm very excited for where this new entry is going. I think with the new team heading up this development, it'll even be more interesting to see where it's going. And all in all, I think Ubisoft are kind of picking up what they have left after all of these allegations against them, which have quite frankly been disgusting. And yeah, I'm interested to see what Ubisoft do next, considering where the company's at the moment. Anyway, on a happier note, I've been Seth from Silver Cell Gaming. Make sure you subscribe. I release videos every week, usually 2 or 1, depending on how my time frame is working out and whether or not I'm really invested in a game like Ghost of Tsushima at the moment. And make sure you check out the website, subscribe, fucking like the video, comment about Far Cry 6. What do you think about the game? Are you interested to see where this is going after Ubisoft have just pretty much become the worst company on earth at the moment, especially in terms of the games industry? And yeah, I'll see you guys next week for another video, hopefully on, I don't know, but we'll wait and see. Anyway, I'll see you guys then.